Okay, so earlier in October was the autumn edition of the Steam Games Festival, an event which featured a whole buttload of demos for new and upcoming indie games. I decided I would play as many of those demos as I could and highlight some of the ones that stood out to me. I wound up with 8 examples from what I think is a pretty healthy selection of genres and styles. Some of them are already out or will be soon, others have a bit of a wait, but I think all of these are worth having on your radar, so let's go!
Have you ever played This War of Mine and been like, I want to play this, but set in the future and it's just the orphans? Of course you have, and Studio Black Flag has got just the game for you. Dystopia sucks for most people, but I'd argue it's significantly worse for a malnourished child with no parents, and that's exactly where OrphanAge starts you and your sibling out. Government agents raid your home, and one of them is like, I only oppress adults, and lets you go, so good on him, I guess. In the character creation screen, points available for your starting stats, here shown as school grades, are determined by your character's age. Potential orphans are also randomly assigned a smattering of personality traits which further impact their needs and how they interact with other orphans and the world. The goal is eventually to make and maintain an orphanage, but the demo is essentially 2 orphans rummaging through garbage, breaking and entering. It's an orphan survival sim. What do you expect? Your orphans have food, sleep, and hygiene needs, but they're kids, so playing is essential as well. Make sure to occasionally socialize with other orphans to stave off insanity. Needs can also be helped by transforming the scraps you pick out of the trash into various stations to cook, rest, and clean, or toys to play with. But the true challenge comes from picking what order to build or upgrade these stations in. Building and gathering take time and energy, and resources are generally scarce, so using them wrong early is a quick path to a hard-knock death. The demo also had a 30-minute timer on it, so I was moving quickly out the gate, but after a few tries, I finally got something vaguely resembling a formal abode up and running, and the time came to bust out into the city. The looting and exploration outside the demo area is cool, but pretty bare bones. I hope and assume that eventually some or most of the buildings you loot will be enterable, but this is a demo, and an early one at that. I'll be frank, in real life I would probably hate to be a child living in the shadows of a futuristic city, but as a game, assembling a crack squad of survivalist orphans is a great time. OrphanAge is currently in a private alpha, so I'm not sure exactly when to expect it, but I really enjoy what Studio Black Flag has built so far. When you first look at Fights in Tight Spaces, a roguelike deck builder combat game from developer Ground Shatter and publisher Mode 7, the immediate vibe is super hot, and for good reason. But despite the aesthetic parallels, the game is substantially closer to something like Slay the Spire. Players make their way through a randomly generated path, engaging in progressively higher stakes combat or text-based encounters as they slowly build and improve a deck of fighting moves in preparation for a big culminating battle. But the biggest difference from the gameplay of Slay the Spire, and the thing that sets Fights in Tight Spaces apart, is that combat occurs on a grid rather than a flat plane. And that's where the mashup with Superhot once again kicks in. You can sidestep enemies, dodge bullets, and then at the end of the fight, you can watch a replay at full speed. And even though it isn't quite as satisfying as the replay feature in Superhot, it is still fun to have the option. And the title isn't lying, it really does feel like a fight in a tight space. During combat encounters, it's perfectly viable to sidestep and slowly poke your way to victory, but to encourage a more aggressive and fast-paced playstyle, players are given optional bonus objectives, which reward them for eliminating enemies in certain ways and for resolving encounters within a finite number of turns. There's also a combo meter, which goes up when combat moves are used consecutively, but is reset when the player dodges. This leads to a nice balance where taking risks and keeping up a breakneck pace is not required, but it can really pay off. The demo only featured one of several stories. The player is an agent bringing down a biker gang, but the other storylines will presumably add to the variety of enemies and locations. And even the single demo story had immense replay value, which I think is the most crucial element for a game of this type. Fights in Tight Spaces is slated to release sometime before the end of 2020. Here's another mashup of familiar things. Nuts, from publisher Noodlecake, is essentially the storytelling style of Firewatch combined with the gameplay of one of those Bigfoot hunting games. One major difference from both of those is the bold color-blocked art style. Also different is the fact that instead of watching for fires or hunting big feet, you're spying on squirrels. In the demo, which takes you through the first few days or weeks of the story, you are a new employee in the park. You receive really well-written exposition from Nina, your handler, via a landline phone in your trailer. She tells you to set up cameras in order to observe and track a local squirrel to his acorn stash. All the technology you're given to do this is functional from a gameplay perspective, but has a second-hand clunky feel to it that gives the game a timeless vibe and low-key draws attention to our underfunded parks departments. The game operates on a day-night cycle. Oh, and the color palette shifts at night. I know I said it already, but this game is really pretty to look at. During the day, you set up cameras to try to capture the squirrel's path to its nuts, which you are informed by your boss is the same every night.
The next morning, you review the footage, compile screenshots, move the cameras, repeat. It's a trial and error experience, but I never felt either too lost or as if it was too easy. The squirrel's movements were just unpredictable enough to require a healthy amount of experimentation and forethought. And when I finally found the hidden stash, I became much more concerned about the squirrels watching me. But the demo ended there, and that was a smart move, because I definitely want to pick up where I left off when Nuts comes out in 2021. Kid Fox Games' story-rich mystery investigation, Lucifer Within Us, is already out. It released a few days after the Autumn Festival ended, and based on both the positive and negative user reviews, the full game is quite short, around 3 hours for a $20 asking price. So that could be an immediate no for you, but I feel like the game's concept is strong enough that I'm highlighting it anyway. The game is set in a futuristic world with heavy religious influence, a magical techno-theocracy if you will, and the vibe just drips off of every facet. The 3D modeling is exactly as detailed as it needs to be and perfectly supplements the more detailed 2D assets. You play as Ada, an investigator for the theocracy whose job is to determine whether criminal activity has stemmed from demonic influence. You collect clues and interview suspects as you slowly piece together a timeline of events, which you then compare side by side to pick out discrepancies in suspect testimony, which catches them off guard and lets you literally search inside their brains for sinful motivations. The process of listening, re-listening, and deducing manages to give a deep and rich experience while keeping things deceptively simple. It's not perfect. I figured out who the perpetrator was and then couldn't figure out how to properly accuse him, which was either me missing some final piece of information or a glitch, but either way it was pretty frustrating. Still, the unique experience of playing this game was overall an enjoyable one, and I do recommend picking it up, maybe on sale, if you're interested. Up next is Phogs, a platformer from Bitloom Games, and if you grew up when I grew up, this game is essentially the Nickelodeon cartoon Cat Dog, but Dog Dog. Many of the mechanics in Phogs parallel things from Cat Dog, but there was always something oddly grotesque about Cat Dog's presentation that Phogs manages to strip away. As the Dog Dog of Phogs, you must stretch, swing, bounce, and use yourself as a hose or flamethrower to navigate charming, whimsical levels where you complete challenges to collect treats and are eventually yourself eaten by a snake, which transports you to the next location. The demo took me through 2 of these locations and quickly showcased a nice variety of environmental puzzles and visuals, and perhaps I've been deceived and the rest of the game is completely devoid of originality, but I'm willing to bet that the rest of the experience will be just as much fun when Phogs is fully released sometime this year. Haven is an adventure RPG from the Game Bakers where you play as a flying anime couple in space. That's normally not my cup of tea. Reeves has always been the Final Fantasy guy, but I gave it a shot because it looked pretty and I liked the Mario Sunshine-style evil goop cleaning mechanics. Even so, I went in skeptical about the story revolving around a lovey-dovey relationship. Once I got into it, however, I was pleased to find myself quite taken by the main characters.
Weren't you supposed to charge up the nest today?
Excuse me if I was working on the engine. I can't do everything.
No worries. I'll go get some more outside.
The voice acting is top-notch and they clearly have great chemistry, which is fortunate because with the sheer amount of semi-to-overtly romantic banter that occurs between our protagonists, that was very much needed. The combat system is simple but engaging, controlling each character with one thumbstick and deciding whether to attack and block individually or together. Because of this, fights can be played alone or cooperatively on a single controller. But what I liked the most about Haven was just traveling around, soaking in the vibes. Movement has a great flow to it that presents just enough challenge to keep it interesting. The story's stakes are high, but even after our lead couple's house ship fell off a cliff, everything maintained a chill, almost meditative feel. Even the most dangerous enemies I ran into were pretty cute once I cleaned off the evil goo and they calmed down. In fact, the most unsettling thing in the game is when the main characters get intimate. It's not the actor's fault, it's just... Yeah. We get it, guys. It's a thing. They're a thing. But maybe you're like Reeves, and that's actually a plus for you. I don't judge. Haven will be out by the end of 2020. Playing Webbed from S-Bug Games makes you really feel like Spider-Man. You are a cute little spider in a forest full of creatures with serious problems they need your help with. Fortunately, most of those problems can be solved by spinning webs and eating bugs. Hopefully less sentient bugs. Movement feels great, and animations of all the creatures you encounter look fantastic. Laying a web and then coming back to find all the flies you've caught is peak spider immersion. But this is not a hyper-realistic spider simulator. Do I want that? I actually might want that. But unrealistic is great too. You can pull a leaf off a tree to use as a glider. You can build up enough momentum while swinging to smash through walls.
The spider shoots laser beams. I was absolutely delighted when I noticed that crawling on a pre-made web makes a tonal plinking noise based on how long the web is. I'm not out here trying to make a guitar or anything, but it's the tiny touches like that which make Webbed stand out and puts it on my wish list for 2021.
Sever Studios' text-based game, The Life and Suffering of Sir Brante, is, to greatly oversimplify, Great Expectations, the RPG, and I love it. Maybe I'm weird for liking this as much as I do. I spent a lot more time playing this one than any other demo, it just kept going and I couldn't put it down. There's no voice acting for me to be snooty about here, just music and the occasional sound effect, but the excellent writing pulled me right in. I've never experienced anything quite like this game. A slow-burn Victorian social drama vibe is not something I commonly associate with video games. You begin as Old Man Sir Insert Name Brante, reflecting on his life. It's made clear that you're on death's door, so this story is gonna end one way or another. Although, in this world, people can be reborn up to 4 times, but it's made clear this is your last time. Wait, what? Let me explain. It's a Victorian family drama, but it's set in a fantasy world with a strict religion-enforced class structure. In this world, everyone is chosen by the gods to be a priest, a noble, or a commoner, and, as you quickly come to learn, the gods live in a beam of light which is visible from the ground, which certainly adds an extra layer of pressure to believe in and follow the system. You play as the child of a common mother and a noble father, which puts you in a unique position. You're given some privileges due to your father's position, but are mostly treated as a commoner. Your character's personal relationship to that dynamic and the world around them is shaped and explored via a series of vignettes which take place over the years of your life. For example, my noble grandfather brought over a highborn widow to get legal advice from my father as a ploy to supplant my lowborn mother, and I chose to behave myself rather than cause a fuss. My father was having none of it, and things became better when grandfather returned to the capital. Later, my similarly lowborn half-sister came and showed me a kaleidoscope, which I looked through while reflecting on the negative impact my grandfather's harshness had on my father. I'm talking about a video game. This is a game, and during both the high-stakes and quiet introspective bits, I was completely engrossed. I know, it probably isn't for everyone, but this really worked for me. This is my list. I don't think the choice to call the family the Brontes was a coincidence. The writing is excellent and very much evokes the Jane Eyre vibe. But even if you read Jane Eyre or Great Expectations or whatever one time in high school and were bored, give this a shot. The way that relationships are built and influenced by your decisions, the way that your current iteration of Sir Brante comes to see the world, all of it feels like you are having an impact. The decisions you are given to make, which affect your character's stats, are interesting and diverse. You have the option in the menu to get a peek at the outcome of each choice, or you can play completely blind. Both ways are fun, but I'd argue playing blind is infinitely more exciting. But this isn't just a choose-your-own-adventure, it is an RPG. The demo went through the first chunk of the game, Brante's childhood, which is itself divided in half. You are given different stats to develop in the two halves that affect the decisions available to you. Decisions can also be made available by your relationships with other characters or the fluctuating willpower bar. At the end of childhood, the cumulative stats are combined together in various ways to become your adulthood stats, which I think is a fantastic, natural, and interactive way of having you build your character. I've now played through the demo a couple of times, and I'm eager to see how those adult stats play into the story when The Life and Suffering of Sir Brante is released early in 2021. So that's all the demos that stood out to me during the Steam Autumn Festival, but if there are any great games I missed out on here, leave a comment so I know to check it out. I'd love to make more compilation reviews like this for any events that showcase a wide selection of new games moving forward. I also showcased some other new demos in the first ever Standard Gaming livestream right here on the channel, and I'd go so far as to say it went decently okay. If you want to check that out, the replay is up, and constructive feedback is greatly appreciated so I can apply it to future streams. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, you can subscribe and hit the like button to help the channel grow. We've just passed 300 subscribers, and that is a small number in the big picture, but it's a big number in our hearts, so thank you for your support. But until next time, I'm Jamie. Thanks for watching Standard Gaming.